So it's no secret that Doctor Who is seemingly going on a break for a little while, and I wanted to kind of take this as an opportunity to sit down, reassess, and kind of do what I think every fan thinks they can do, and attempt to fix Doctor Who. Now, I'm not saying I actually could, and this is by no means me saying that I could do a better job than anyone in charge. I don't think I could. But this is just my opinion on where the show could go next, that I think would lead to it potentially having more success than it currently does. Now, there are a couple of caveats that I want to add to this before we get into it. For one thing, we're not really going to be talking about Billie Piper as the next Doctor in this video, for the simple reason that I think that that is mainly a one-off bit of fan service, maybe a special or two, and isn't the mainline Doctor going forwards. At least I kind of hope that it isn't. I'm kind of assuming that that's just a one-off thing that is not going to be the future, and it was kind of a last-minute addition to kind of continue the show forwards. So this will basically be a video of me pitching what happens after that, essentially. Further to that, I'm not going to suggest the two following things. One, I'm not just going to say, sack Russell T Davies, sack Julie Gardner. I'm not doing that. I'm not Christopher Eccleston, because I'm in the position of, while I don't think this era was perfect, I do think there are merits to it that could be carried forward into another series with this team. And further to that, I don't think it's really constructive just to say, sack whoever's in charge, get someone else, because, what does that really mean? You're basically just saying a complete hypothetical and a random new person. What I'm basically trying to do in this video is use what we already have in kind of a means to rejig the show a little bit, essentially. And the other thing I'm not going to say is just make more episodes, because I feel like if that was on the table, they would have done it by now. I'm going to try and use the 8-episode format in a way that, at least in my opinion, will work better. So with all that out of the way, be sure to subscribe if you're new, that would be greatly appreciated. We do regular Doctor Who content here on the channel, and any support would be greatly appreciated, but let's dive right in. Number 1, my first order of business if I was to head into Bad Wolf Studios and they basically handed me the keys to the TARDIS and said, look, we don't know what to do with it, over to you. First thing I'm doing, casting an unknown actor. We haven't actually had an unknown actor as the Doctor since Matt Smith. When you think about it, Capaldi was massive due to the thick of it. Whittaker was a rising star and was very much known on British television due to things like Broadchurch. And Gatwa was also not only a rising star, but was also in some pretty major projects prior to him being on Doctor Who, such as Sex Education and Barbie, to the point where I imagine season 1 had to be retooled somewhat to accommodate that. That's why we got the Doctor Light episodes. And look, by no means am I saying that, we shouldn't have had Gatwa. I'm very glad that we had Gatwa, and I do think that he is a good Doctor. But I think the benefit of having an unknown actor would be that the show would act as their star vehicle. The show would be the thing that propels them into the mainstream, and they would be committed to that show long term. So you wouldn't have to worry about someone like, say, Ncuti Gatwa, who is obviously doing season 2 and is waiting on season 3, but doesn't want to wait too long because they have other career prospects elsewhere. By signing on an unknown actor, you allow that to be their focus for a while, and I think that would benefit the show. So that's my first order of business. Who this unknown actor would be, I don't know, hence why they're an unknown actor. Just pick someone who you see in an audition and you go, wow, they're really good. Get them. Don't care who it is, don't care if it's a man, a woman, whoever, just get them. If they're good, great. Second order of business. Make the series episodic and ditch the arc stuff. This may confuse some people if you've been watching my channel for a while, because I was a long-time advocate of Doctor Who going in the serialised direction. My argument was that that is the direction that streaming shows are going in, and I don't think a show really works with 8 episodes where it's largely episodic, but then you thread an arc through it. And while I agree with that sentiment, I've changed my mind in the sense that I think going fully episodic and ditching the arc stuff would be to the show's benefit. Because think about it. What's the stuff that's really resonated with the general public the most about this era? I'll tell you one thing, it's not The Mystery of Mrs. Flood, or Susan Triad, or The Snow, or Ruby's Mum, or The Ranis, or whatever. The thing that resonated most with the general public is Mr. Ringading, genuinely. Go on TikTok right now and search Mr. Ringading. You will still see people doing art of him, redubbing him with different lines. doing memes about him. He did break into the mainstream in a way that I've not really seen a Doctor Who thing do in a while. And the reason it did wasn't because it was attached to anything like particularly old or established. The reason it did is just because it was a fun, weird, wacky idea that stood on its own, and people looked at it and went, that's cool. Same goes for Dugadoo in Interstellar Song Contest. When you think about Interstellar Song Contest, not much of that was really remarked upon by the general public, especially not the Rani reveal at the end. You know what was, though? Dugadoo, to the point where they had a full 24/7 loop of Dugadoo going on the YouTube channel, and that went sort of semi-viral as a TikTok sound for a bit, with people even dressing up as Dugadoo and doing the Dugadoo song. Russell gets a lot of flack for this quote.
It's very much kind of internet age storytelling where...
And was that deliberate?
Yes, you just hope it'll generate content.
And I'm going to say something controversial by saying that I don't actually think that wanting your show to generate a buzz is a bad thing. The issue is, I think he misunderstands what actually gets the general public talking. At least in this era of Doctor Who. Sure, bringing back the Rani, or bringing back Omega, or bringing back Sutekh makes people like me and you, probably watching this video, because you're on a Doctor Who YouTube channel, excited because we know those things. We get hyped to see them, and we wanted to see them back for years. But do the general public really care? No. Am I saying it's impossible to make them care? No. Russell did do a good job of making the audience care about the old monsters in his first era. But I do think there's a difference between the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Master, and the Rani, Omega, Sutekh. These characters that, at best, appeared once or twice, and in the case of the Rani, wasn't even in an era that was particularly popular with the general public either. And that's not to disparage the Rani as a character. I love the Rani, and I was one of the people saying I wanted her back, but looking back on it, was anyone really talking about the Rani outside of us? I don't think they were. When you think about season 1 and you look back on Sutekh, which, as you know, I'm a massive Sutekh fan, that name reveal was hype for all of us who knew who Sutekh was. But to the rest of the public, the reveal of that name, it's just a name. It means nothing to them. Even less so when an episode culminates in them watching Pyramids of Mars. Because the casual audience feel like they're missing something because they haven't seen this episode, and the people who have seen this episode are probably just sat there going, man, I wish I was watching that instead. So, as far as I'm concerned, the solution is obvious. Ditch the fan stuff, fully embrace the weird and wacky stuff that Doctor Who's been doing before, and make it an episodic adventure series where literally anything could happen. Because I think that's kind of what they've been trying to do anyway. Even episodes like 73 Yards, which I know are controversial, did numbers on TikTok because it appealed to that kind of unsolved mysteries kind of crowd with those AI voices kind of going, a woman stares at another woman from miles away and then she follows her around. Like, I saw a number of those back when 73 Yards came out. The stuff that's generated content for this era, ironically, probably isn't the stuff that was supposed to. The stuff that generated the content was just the fun, weird ideas. And I think if you were to lean into that for your series, I think you'd be onto a winner. I'm reminded a lot of another show that was very popular for its weird and wacky ideas that also revolves around an old man travelling the universe with a young sidekick. Rick and Morty. I used to love Rick and Morty, and I loved it because of how weird and inventive and creative it was, and it seems like a lot of other people did too. A lot of the stuff that caught on in early Rick and Morty was stuff like the Meeseeks and Mr. Poopy Butthole and Pickle Rick, who I know is controversial for a myriad of reasons that we won't get into today, but that was the stuff, like it or not, that resonated with the general audience. And I think it's no coincidence that as soon as the show started becoming about its lore, but not only about its lore, but also kind of pastiching and semi-mocking and referencing its own place in pop culture, that's when the show started to drop off viewers. Think about this as well. Lux, which I've mentioned before. What's the bit of Lux that people remember the most? I think if you were to ask the Bad Wolf officers, what they assumed would be the thing that people remembered the most would be the fan scene, right? Would be the scene where the Doctor comes out the TV and talks to a bunch of Doctor Who fans. Because that is a big fan service scene where the Doctor Who is directly acknowledging the audience and its place in pop culture at the current moment. But it's not. The thing that people remember from Lux is Mr. Ringading, is the titular Lux. Because it was a fun, weird concept. And I just can't help but feel that if that was where we were going instead of being so referential and so reverent of the show and its place in pop culture, that we'd be in a better position, I think. Don't have a series arc. Just have fun episodic adventures and have the through line be the characters. Which leads me on to my third point, bring the focus back to character development. One of my core issues with this era is that it seems to have deprioritized character development and character moments and quiet moments where we understand who these people are and what their motivations are with moments of hype and spectacle. It's very much the Marvel Cinematic Universe approach to storytelling, specifically later Marvel Cinematic Universe, because the early MCU does do a pretty good job of utilising its characters. But the stuff that worked so well in Russell T Davies 1 was the domestic stuff, the family stuff. And it's not even just Russell T Davies 1. Go back and watch the 60th anniversary. I know that there's some controversial aspects to the 60th anniversary. I know not everyone loves it. But one thing I think you cannot deny that run of episodes did well was the characterization stuff. Was those quieter moments where the Doctor and Donna were talking about everything he's been through since they last met. Or Donna and Sylvia talking about how to deal with Rose's identity and trying to make sure they get it right. And that was the stuff that I really loved in the 60th. And that was the stuff that I was really hoping would be at the heart and the core of this new era. And unfortunately, it was deprioritized. And I think that's a shame, because I think that's where Russell's always excelled. And I think the 60th is proof that he can still do that stuff. That stuff's still in him. And I think that's always been where he excelled. People have often said to me, they've said, oh, the issue with them doing fantasy and doing gods and all this sort of stuff is that the explanations for it are a little bit weak. And while I agree that that is an issue that they should address, it's not exactly a new issue for Russell either. His strength, even back in the day, wasn't really in the sci-fi resolutions of things. He ends Series 3 with the Doctor becoming Space Jesus. The only difference back then is that in RTD1 he used sci-fi technobabble to justify it, in RTD2 he used mythical technobabble to justify it. There isn't really a huge difference between Sutekh being dragged through the vortex on a leash and Donna flicking a bunch of switches to turn the Daleks off. But RTD1 gets more of a pass for that stuff because it nails the character moments after that. And I think, had the character moments been stronger in this era, I don't think people would have been as annoyed by the finales and their resolutions as they ended up being. And as I said before, I think trying to do a RTD1 style 12 episode arc build-up in 8 episodes just doesn't really work. I appreciate there is an irony in me saying that we should have a more episodic and less lore-focused series of Doctor Who as someone who really doesn't like Series 11, because to Series 11's credit, that is what Series 11 tried to do, and I do rate it for that, in fairness. My issue is, I don't think Series 11 did it overly well. I didn't think the concepts were that interesting or that unique, or are really going to capture the imaginations of the general public in the same way. Whereas, with a lot of the RTD2 concepts, a lot of them have resonated with the public. They just never get the full focus. The focus is always given to the big bad, the big law enemy entity at the end. I mean, Wishworld is another great example of this. People loved the kind of Truman Show, WandaVision-esque society, but by Reality War, that whole thing's kind of gone, and it's a bit of a shame. But the final point I want to make is probably going to be a little bit controversial, and maybe, some people will be like, no, I don't agree. I think we need to darken the tone a little bit. There's a funny thing about making TV shows for kids, and the thing about that is that kids don't want to feel like they're watching a kids show. Kids want to feel like they're watching something that's probably a bit too old for them. And I can attest to this. I had a brother who's now 16, but I tried to get into Doctor Who when he was about 12, 13-ish. And he turned around to me and he said, I think it's naff. I think it's too silly. And he loves things like Stranger Things and all of that sort of stuff. By maturing the tone a little bit, I'm not saying, you go full, like, Breaking Bad with Doctor Who or anything. But just by maturing it a little bit, I think you would allow kids to feel like they were watching something a bit more grown up, and the older fans who cling on to this show for dear life will be grateful because they'll feel like they were catered to as well. An episode like Space Babies doesn't work because kids now aren't into stuff like that. They look at that and go, that's rubbish, that's naff. Farting Aliens worked in the 2000s, but the thing is, kids are maturing rapidly in this day and age, owing to the fact that the internet exists and they have access to anything they want at the click of a button. And we can talk about whether that's healthy or not for children. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. But that is the reality of the world that we live in. But those are just some of my thoughts. Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments below. I'd be very interested to hear your opinions on some of my musings. These are just some of my ideas. And while we're here, the only classic monster I want to see in the next series is the Daleks. I was an advocate for a Dalek break for the longest time, but then I realised that that would result in a Doctor not getting to meet them, and I don't want to go through that again. So Russell, when we get a brand new Doctor in the next couple of years, make sure they have a Dalek episode. Otherwise I'm going to scream. Maybe give them a new design while you're at it. But whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments below. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.